Unmute. All right, I think we're going to get started now as it's 5:42. Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you to our panelists as well for joining us today. My name is Joy and I'm the outreach chair for HuskyADAPT, and I'm really happy to be helping today with the design industry panel that we have yearly for our organization. And for people on Zoom, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat at this time or as we go on with our event. So minimize this. All right, so for our agenda today, we're going to be starting off with panelist introductions. Following that, we're going to have some general questions and answer times from our audience. And then after that, depending on how many design team students show up, we're going to hopefully having some design team feedback time as well. So our first panelist today is Mark Harness, and I'll allow him to introduce himself. If you want to just tell me the next slide, I can move it forward.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here on this blustery, dark evening. Appreciate it. I'm getting over the flu, so I'll keep my mask on. But it's nice to meet you all and to connect with HuskyADAPT. I'm Mark Harness. I'm an associate professor in rehabilitation medicine. I direct a couple centers, and I can't remember what I put. The Center for Technology and Disability Studies is a program that focuses on assistive technology, but also has some programs like we have a project focused on the Americans with Disabilities Act and helping to increase the understanding by people who have rights under the ADA, as well as helping people who have responsibilities under the ADA to understand those responsibilities. I also direct the University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. That's a center grant inside of a larger institute called Institute of Human Development and Disability. It's if you've ever been over, hopefully on a nice sunny day on the Ship Canal, and seen those brown brick buildings, that's where we live. There's a school over there. There's a genetics program. There's a clinical program. So we have a number of clinics that mostly children attend. And then I mentioned the ADA Knowledge Translation Center. And I think you all know that, you may all know that I started just this year as education director for CREATE. So I work with Jen Mankoff and Olivia Banner on Upper Campus and trying to figure out just how I can help create. So next slide. I was supposed to put stuff about my work, so I tried to do a little word map. I think a lot of my work, of course, really focuses on disability. So almost everything I do connects to disability. My work is not clinical or biomedical. It's really more about the experience of living with disability, rights and experiences of discrimination as a person with a disability, and as well as a fair bit of work around technology for people with disabilities. And Brennan here looks at a program that I won't steal his thunder, but it's called WATAP, and it is a program I've been connected with for a long time. Next slide. And so I just put up some of the other programs that are kind of part of my universe. I mentioned the USAID, WATAP. I'll let Brennan, you can describe. There's some other programs in the Center for Technology and Disability Studies. ICANN Connect is a program that provides technology for people who are deafblind. There's another program that's not listed up here called Independent Living for the Blind. It's a program that supports people who are losing vision, especially as they get older, and includes some technology components as well. We have the UW Employment Program, which is a program that supports people primarily with intellectual and developmental disabilities as they are employed. So kind of a whole range of supports to help people to acquire and maintain employment. Then the last one down there is just a small project we have. It's called the Rhonda Weiss Center for Accessible Data. It's a kind of interesting project because it's focused on every state's required to collect data about their special education programs. Those data should be accessible, by people with disabilities. The reality is it's not super accessible. So this center's job is to help every state improve the accessibility of the data that they produce so that people with disabilities, disabled people, can use those data for advocacy and other kinds of purposes. So I just mentioned those so you kind of get a sense for the types of programs that are here on Lower Campus in particular. And then I'll turn to you.
Thank you, Mark. So our next panelist is Brennan Johnston. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, my name is Brennan Johnston, and I work for the Washington Assistive Technology Access Program that Mark mentioned is part of eWorks. And my job title is Assistive Technology Support Technician. And this is actually my first year being in assistive technology, so I'm going to give a very brief overview of how I got to this place. But essentially, my day-to-day responsibilities right now is to help maintain our lending library. It helps folks check out AT, try it out for a little bit, and decide if it's something that they want before they go and buy it for themselves. I also manage our 3D printing program that has been recently able to start printing assistive technology for folks for free in the state of Washington by request. And then I also do a lot of just technical support in general, along with education for assistive gaming and VR and smart home technology, and kind of more of the young kid crowd type of stuff. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So here's just a really quick, brief description of how I got to this job position. So I was in the U.S. Army for several years and worked on a research and development program by the end of my career as a quality assurance specialist. And I was able to get a lot of behind the curtains knowledge of what it takes to develop prototypes safely and to really kind of think outside the box as far as design. And then after leaving the military, I became a part-time student and part-time computer repair specialist and worked around some of the local computer repair places here in Seattle. And I learned quite a bit about serving low-income folks that would normally throw away computers that couldn't afford to do that, and how to repair and make things work and recycle things in a way that really actually came in handy later for this job that I have now. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So I earned my Associates of Science from Seattle Central College, and our rocketry team was privileged enough to participate in an undergraduate research project for the Washington NASA Space Grant Consortium. And there I learned quite a bit more about 3D printing, prototyping, and development, which then, after being hired at WATAP, has influenced a lot of my work with 3D printing assistive technology. You can go ahead. So here's just a quick examples of things that I've designed from scratch from myself, and then also took inspiration from other products that are available, but that are just very expensive and cost prohibitive to folks, and that we're able to produce far cheaper on our side and then give away for free to folks that need it. So the first thing right there was a elevator button practice board for somebody that recently lost their vision and wanted to, in the comfort of their own home, be taught and learn how to use elevator buttons by touch. The middle one is a plug pulling device where my coworker was trying to get a set of them for his elderly mother, and they were selling for like $10 a piece. And that was just not affordable to get a whole pack of those for somebody. And this helps with mobility in general, just plugging in and unplugging. The child seat unbuckler is a product that exists, but I made my own version of it. You can go to. All this is free files, by the way, that is online for somebody that has a 3D printer to download. The occupational therapists came to me and asked for one of her patients a makeup brush holder that was able to slide into a wrist brace, and then a toothpaste tube squeezer. This is kind of a product that I put together of designs that were already out there but weren't really functional. So I was able to edit it and make it a little bit better. Go to the next one. This one I'm very excited about is the Washington Talking Book in Braille Library. asked for some 3D printed Braille alphabet boards for their introduction to Braille classes. And there's a lot of complicated problems with 3D printing Braille that is legible. It tends to be sharp on FDM printers and unreliable and not really legible a lot of the time. So this design that I've worked on is printing the Braille in an upright row first, and that will make the Braille dot smooth, and then it'll slide in kind of in a puzzle piece configuration afterwards to hold it all together. And the feedback that I've gotten on this version has been very good. This is the area that I know the most about right now, which is tactile map making. The WATAP offices I had to make on my own from scratch, but on the right-hand side is from a website where you just plug in an address from touchmappers.org, and then it'll give you a 3D print file already made for free. The middle one I'm very proud of. It's kind of a mix of the two. There was a student, an international student that was completely blind that was having trouble learning for a route from class to class using just traditional methods of teaching routes. And this took the touch mapper map, and then I customized it to raise the route and the buildings that she would be attending class so that she could differentiate between the other buildings, the path with the path that she's going to take to the buildings that she's going to go to. And then, and our program, it is pretty new. I think the last 6 months we really started to get going, was able to partner with Sound Transit System to work on their research for tactile maps that they're going to eventually put in stations. And then they were partnering with another university to get feedback on shapes and symbols, but they found that some of their community members had neuropathy or things that made it difficult for them to read the swell paper that they were using to test different symbols. And so the 3D printed version from us was actually able to help a lot of their community members give feedback on different symbol shapes that normally they wouldn't be able to get feedback on. You can go to the next one. So this is the current version that we're on based on the feedback that we got. And so for 3D printing, it's very good for rapid prototyping and development. And so that's why, for the most part, I tend to go to that when trying things out for assistive technology first, and then going to more permanent type materials afterwards. So that's just kind of a quick overview of what my experience and knowledge base is.
Thank you both so much. Next up, we just have time for some general questions and answers from the audience. So first off, I'll open up the floor to everyone out here, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise their hand, and if you can just make sure if there's anyone on chat to let us know as well. Yeah.
Did you have to take any specific courses or get any certificates or anything like that?
For the position that I have right now, no. Actually, this is the first position of its kind when I was hired on. They knew that they needed technical and IT support, and just have worked with me to develop the job position what I felt like they needed. And I've just been really fortunate to be given more responsibilities outside of what I was originally hired for. So I actually have no certificates for the position I have right now.
I will say, so Brennan came in and does a lot of the tech side of work. There are a couple of other staff who are assistive technology specialists. They're more about provision and fitting of assistive technology. And I believe they both have occupational therapy backgrounds. And so one of the focuses really strongly on ergonomic design and computer access. And the other one focuses really on access for people who are blind and partial vision. So if you're interested in like assistive technology provision, that's kind of a different space, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I should have mentioned that as well, is that I'm supporting these specialists essentially at the job that they do. And I do believe that there is a professional certificate that they have for that position.
There are some positions. There are some certifications for assistive technology.
And their role is, like you mentioned, is more of helping pair people with assistive technology that they might not be aware of, and to get them into something that would actually help them, that they guide them in the right direction.
And WATAP, I mean, if you may know this already, but WATAP is the Washington Assistive Technology Act program, which is a very strange name, but it's but every state has an AT Act, an Assistive Technology Act. It's actually a federal funding structure. And so WATAP is Washington's AT Act program. And so if any state and many territories would have an AT Act. And the primary purpose of those is to provide demonstrations and loans of assistive technology. So the idea is that people with disabilities can come in, they can observe assistive technology that might work for them. And then if they think something might work, they can borrow it for a period of time, see if it'll actually work back in their home or work environment. And if it does, then they would use some funding structure to actually purchase it. But that solves the problem of assistive technology abandonment, which is a big problem. Where people spend a lot of money for something expensive that they think will work for them, and it doesn't work for them. Yeah, that's the idea though.
I'm still learning. I've been in this job for just a little over a year, and we do quite a few things. I'm still trying to understand this program.
And it's interesting because WATAP does a lot, but there are also many things it doesn't do. Like they don't do mobility. They don't put people in wheelchairs. That's a very specialized kind of thing. But they do a lot of blind and vision work. They do a lot of so the kind of stuff you saw, Brennan, 3D printing that has to do with fine motor control and so forth. Yeah, so you all can actually go over. They have do you want to talk about the library?
Yeah, our website, I brought some flyers that I can hand out as well. But we have a lending library posted online. And if there's anything on there that you see is of interest to you, just even to know what it does, you can email us and set up an appointment. And we have a demonstration area or even just get a tour of our building. It's just on the other side of the hospital here. I walked here. And we also have a demonstration space that's still a work in progress, but we have a 3D printer in there that we can talk about some voice activated things using Alexa and a few other devices for somebody that might not have the in-person experience of knowing how that works first. There's just quite a bit of computer access AT that we have in general because we work with the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation quite a bit. So they request items to have in our library so they can help folks that they're working with get into a workplace comfortably and give some advice on different like keyboards and mice. So we have a long list of different those type of computer access devices as well.
Yeah, and excuse me, they will. So what happens for Washington? But if somebody in Washington needs access, they'll mail it to you. Like if you live in Spokane, they'll mail it to you. So if you have friends or colleagues or family in other states, they can also get the same service through their ATM. Yeah.
And it's open to everybody, whether you have a disability or not, you can still use the program.
The training can be done individually or I haven't seen on the website. Is it only for groups?
It's a case-by-case basis. So an individual that is interested in it on their own coming to us, we can set up an appointment just for one person. We can also do groups, but there is, if you're coming from an organization as a group, there are, you'd have to talk to our director about like what the cost would be, because there are some cases where they will charge a fee for consultation.
I think there's part of my question, but as a student, I'm interested in WhatsApp. I'm wondering.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you can maybe come in and familiarize with the adaptive ways, and are there any other opportunities or things?
So if you're, I don't remember if it's just the graduate program here, but we do teach a class once a year for OT students and do a walkthrough for students that are interested in our program. It is. So the assistive technology classes are, from what I understand, contracted through the different organizations, and our specialists are paid for that service. So I'm not sure if we would give a class just to one individual person. And that teacher that I know that we do once a year with, their program pays for that class that we do for assistive technology. So I would have to maybe follow up with you if I could get your information and get some answers for you, because I'm not 100% certain.
Yeah, I'm not 100% certain either. I think, I do know they, with the UW OT program, they offer a course.
Program director.
Tracy J, yeah.
That Gracie's actually sounds familiar.
I think Tracy probably works with WATAP for part of that course. Have you taken the course? Because I haven't. Your first year, okay. I do think that's where it will happen, but if there are specific things you're interested in, you can always, yeah.
The last one that we went to last year was about no tech, low tech solutions that were kind of, and I brought a book that a lot of this is based off of, if anyone was interested for OT students specifically. And we have that book in our library now for OT students that want to check it out, that give you the basics of materials that you can use for do-it-yourself AT and some tools to start out with and stuff like that. And that's one of the classes that I know that my colleague teaches for the OT class once a year.
Curious, is that Trace, one of Trace Welcome's books?
Yes. It is. And it's not a cheap book, so that's why we have it in our library. So if you wanted to check it out and get ideas from it, you can without.
You say the name of the book, Mom?
I'm gonna pull it out because I'm not gonna remember the entire title off the top of my head. Assistive Technology Solutions in Minutes by Teresa Welcome. This is book 3, and the front cover says "Make stuff in months." So it's a really excellent source of information, and it has QR codes with videos for everything that she makes. It's really great.
There's it's kind of an interesting discussion because there is a whole kind of makers group in, as you guys know, in assistive technology. And there was this thing called 5-minute solutions, right? And it was like, what can you put together with duct tape and, sticks and stuff? And it was a movement that pushed back against an assistive technology industry that was very insular and very proprietary. And, everything was, for the longest time, everything was very specialized. Like it was made for people with this kind of disability. And so because it was so specialized, it was very expensive. And so now you see a lot of pushback where a lot of commercial systems are built on iPhones and stuff like that, right? So that you see costs coming down. But there was a time in the assistive technology industry where everything was just like ridiculously expensive, $1,000 for this thing, and so I think some of this like maker stuff is really is people saying, look, we need to figure this out in a simpler way. So there are trade-offs because some of the stuff you make is not going to last as long or have, there are those issues, but I think it's an interesting movement.
And I, from what I understand, that's the reason why WhatsApp exists with its lending library as it does now, is because it would cost $5,000 for an OCR device, a reading device that somebody might not even like, and there's no returns. So they can try it with us and try this big machine out that has a big magnifying camera with a big screen and high contrast, and that costed maybe $10,000 originally. Now our library is full of iPads because it does all that on an iPad now. So.
Yeah. There's a time when, there was a time when, how do I say this? Like, so maybe even now, I think it can be a little bit tricky to get an iPad or a computer purchased instead of a specialized device, because a lot of the funding systems that pay for it require things to be medical equipment, right? And so iPad isn't medical equipment, even though what you might be running on it is augmentative and alternative communication devices and so forth. So there's a whole mess of how things get paid for, right? Which cause things to be more expensive than they need to be. But you guys can solve all that.
So the question, we have a lot of students here who are extremely accessibility, right? But not all of them are gonna go be ATPs, assistive technology providers, and RITs, and rehabilitation clinicians. how do you propose that they can be involved in accessibility?
Well, I think just broadly, accessibility is something that you can do wherever you work, right? There's a level of advocacy. I'm constantly amazed. You know, I feel like every time I turn around, I think we've talked about this. We've talked about what does it take for an accessible presentation like this, or what does accessibility mean in classrooms, and it's kind of like you know, pushing that rock up the hill. You have to keep pushing, and it requires people who understand and can advocate and will speak up on an ongoing basis. And so you show up and something's not accessible, then you have to be the one who makes the fuss, right? I mean, there to some extent, it's being that person who's always saying, well, what about accessibility? Is this accessible? Did we do X? Did we do Y? I mean, it's I think that's a piece of it, but that's accessibility. Assistive technology, I know less about how everybody can stay involved with assistive technology if you're moving in different spaces, but I do think you can. The same kinds of questions can play out. Like if you're moving into a space where you're developing software or you're developing products, thinking about the extent to which those products are natively accessible from the beginning, and especially in the software world, that you're building software that meets at least, you know, basic accessibility technology standards. So I don't know if that helps or not, but I do think you have to be that person, right? You just have to keep asking the question, and it's amazing how usually very well-intentioned people who just don't know, and you have to keep reminding them. What do you guys think? What are your strategies that you think would make sense? What or that you've already taken?
A combination of just like the basic things like having subtitles for having Zoom options, something like that, and asking these questions because I'm sure there's always more that we can do, and it's just like having to be because I'm not sure like I enjoy the week I tend to be with my events and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I think that makes sense. The other piece really is asking disabled people, right? And making sure that they're having, you know, sometimes you have to look around and say, where are people with disabilities? Why aren't they here? And yeah, and follow those leads. Yeah, exactly. What do you think?
I think that a concept that has been very new to me that I'm finding is now essential in my job and educating my family is universal design, and taking that with you is understanding that everything needs to be designed going forward with everybody in mind, and in the end, that's going to help everybody. So I know that the Universal Design Council that Alan is part of and I helped out with really focuses on educating people what assistive technology is, as well as a universal design as an idea, and just to educate friends and family about AT being something that isn't necessarily a specialized medical device, but a little fidget toy for somebody to use during the presentation. It's using a phone calendar reminder for a meeting. There's so many things that we use as tools for ourselves that we don't even think of as an assistive device. And when we start thinking of assistive devices more universally helpful, I think that it's easier to include the rest of the things like closed captions automatically and by default, and the more people are aware of it, that becomes seen more, at least in my experience.
Brendan brought me a fidget toy.
I brought everybody a fidget toy if anybody got a 3D printer with our logo on a fidget toy. So if anybody would like one, I'll have some.
You mentioned a bunch of assistive tools and technologies that you would 3D printing, like the full, like yeah.
Yes, yeah.
But at HuskyADAPT, we have a lot of design teams that are pushed by like people in the same community because they come to us with like something I want a solution for. So I was just wondering if you could like provide some insight into your design process or like how you approach problem solving.
Yeah, well, I can say that from my experience, it is such an underserved community for the design aspect right now. And I use a combination of tools right now for my own designs, but I'm self-taught, so it takes me about 2 to 3 weeks to come up with a really solid design that I like, and that's not really sustainable for the amount of requests that I'm getting. And so from the tools that I use to make things, I've had to really slow down on what I provide people that would like. And so it'd be really great if there was some sort of a student community that would be willing to volunteer their time to design things and send it to our program to print. Because that's where our bottleneck essentially is the design process. There is a website out there that collects a lot of this AT in one place called Makers Making Change. It's a really great place, but they also have the same problem. There's not enough designers, there's not enough volunteer 3D printers, and anybody that puts in a request that I've referred to them has not heard back yet in the last 6 months that they have tried to reach out. So, and know that they're just because they're really backed up right now. And their website doesn't have a lot of devices on there right now. And it's because there's a vetting process to make sure it's working. So I would love to do more, learn more, and I have so many other job responsibilities that I just can't let that be my full focus. So what I do is pick one project per month, and if I can do it in that month, then great. If I can't, I put it down. And
What's your process?
for my process, I guess, is so the Braille is my kind of beginning to end idea was I use Fusion 360 AutoCAD, and I used Adobe Illustrator. So I found that for tactile maps as well, is that if you make it an Illustrator DXF copy of what you want first and then import it into Fusion 360, it's a lot more manipulatable and it's easier to work with, and then you can go back and change things a little bit easier. Again, I'm self-taught, so that might not be the most efficient method. And then from there, I will go and start just testing. And we have had a subpar printer for the first 6 months, but then we got a new one that has all of the fancy bells and whistles. So it just is really easy to design something, print it, see if it works. And if it doesn't, I'll just go at it again based on what I learned. So for the Braille, it was maybe 2 weeks of trying something out and getting feedback. They didn't like Braille, so then I came at whatever the problem was at. I just tried to work around that first. I'm also part of a AT 3D printing interest group for other AT providers. I think there's maybe 10 of them from different states that are all trying to learn 3D printing along with me. So we kind of teach each other and learn from each other during those meetings and pull our resources to learn. If there's anything specific about my process you'd like to know, try to answer.
It's really interesting that you mentioned, like someone comes to a specific option, and like how do you kind of for it to like think about how you want to approach it, or something similar?
Well, I could say for me personally, step one is Google if something exists yet or not, because there's so much assistive technology that is hidden on websites that are small and not on Amazon, and are probably far better research and design to begin with. So I'll go and see if something exists first. And if it does, and it's just a piece of plastic and it's cost prohibitive, then I'll take inspiration from that. If it's something that doesn't exist yet, like the elevator buttons, I just have naturally been an engineering brain person. So I like to draw out what I'm going to do first, kind of get an idea about it in my head on paper first, and then work through the 3D modeling afterwards. And it also really helps to know the limitations of a 3D printer. So there's a lot of materials in here that I've worked with a little bit, but because I'm managing the 3D printing program, that's what I'm trying to learn. That's what I've kind of focused on. But I will say that it's not the end all be all. It is a tool on the tool bench. And if you mess around with one long enough to know what it is good at and what it's not, then I think that you would probably be smarter than me and wouldn't try to print Braille on it and go a different route. So yeah, just don't try to make 3D printing work in an application that it's just not gonna be good for it. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, I think, or just a quick follow up on that. So I was, or all three of us were on the design team last year, and I think we all went into style prototype, which is definitely a very good process. But I know that's something that students can face when like starting to tackle accessible design is getting discouraged and frustrated. How do you deal with that?
I have the privilege to take breaks. I'm not on a really hard schedule. It's really about my own timeline, which is, it helps a lot, I think, is if something is just not working, and the more you try to force it to work, it's just going to be difficult to work. So maybe come back at it with a different angle, or just put it down for a little bit and work on something else. That's what I've done with the Braille, was that this was a finished version 3 months ago. I got discouraged, put it down for a couple months, and now I'm excited about it again. So I guess I don't really have a lot of advice for being on a challenge team and having a deadline, but I can say that I also am just a very persistent person. I really like the challenge of getting something right in the end and pushing through, even though it's difficult. So just determination, I guess. It's not really great advice, but it's what I got.
We had a question submitted to us earlier from someone in the community about advice for pursuing a fulfilling career for someone with a disability or chronic illness, and we're wondering if you could speak towards that. Either of you?
Advice for
Pursuing a fulfilling career for someone with a disability or chronic illness.
that's a broad question.
Yeah.
I mean, there's there really, how do I say this? There's no reason somebody with a disability or a chronic illness couldn't have a very fully fulfilling career. I do think that there is a benefit to sort of coming to a strong sense of identity around the disability or chronic illness, being able to advocate for yourself, being able to articulate what your needs are, and being able to being confident in what your rights are as a person with a disability or a disabled person in the spaces you're working. I think that those are kind of the key. I mean, there will be people who discriminate, for sure. I mean, that is the nature of disability, and that's why we have civil rights laws. But to the extent that somebody loves the work that they do and they want to do it, and they can advocate for the kinds of accommodations that they need, then and some of those might be assistive technology, then there shouldn't be any limitations, right? I don't know if I'm missing a part of the question, but I do think that we know through some of our work that not everybody's comfortable being, especially people who have non-apparent disabilities, not everybody's comfortable being open about or disclosing the disability that they have, and that can be a challenge. I think there is good evidence that although there is risk, that disclosure and clarity around a disability is better in the long run for folks, and really being able to ask for and receive reasonable accommodation. So what do you guys think? Do you have other thoughts about that question?
You really have to find for yourself, break it down from there, figure out where there's. Then figure out how you get it there. Seems like it would be a very personal definition.
What would be fulfilling? Yeah. And there are barriers for all of us, right? And, and but there may be unique barriers for somebody with a disability, but it shouldn't, yeah, shouldn't be, hopefully, we shouldn't limit somebody from having to fulfill the career in the career that they want to be in.
Thank you.
The general thing you can do is finding a good fit if you're finding other disabilities and that's questions and just kind of, just kind of at the end of the day saying, hey, this day has been terrible because of this thing, and I say, I experienced that yesterday. Just having similar experiences.
It's a really, yeah, having a community. Yep, thank you. I should have thought about that too. Yeah. Having a community is good in general, right? But the experience of disability is unique. So having the community people who have that experience can be really useful.
I think that that's great. Yeah. Just from my own experience, don't be afraid to advocate for yourself, and then have a community of people that can help advocate for you as well. It's in my experience, better to disclose and get the tools that you need to make your job fulfilling. Because if you're constantly fighting against yourself, then you're not going to be very fulfilled.
You could go back and talk to your 20-year-old self. What advice would you have for students?
Join the Air Force.
Oh, my 25-year-old probably wouldn't listen. That's an interesting question. I mean, be a little more confident. Try to push past the self-doubt a little bit. Stop limiting yourself, because other people aren't limiting you, and you're really limiting. I mean, these are the kind of things I would have said to my more timid self back then. I'm not sure that's true for everybody, but I do think that we get in our own way more than we need to, and we assume that people are judging us and paying attention to us, and the reality is that it's kind of the other way around. Fewer people care about and are paying attention to us than we think, and so it really is take a few more risks and fight. So those are things I would have said to myself. Yeah, quit punishing yourself so much.
I guess a more serious answer for me would be, don't be afraid to be passionate about things and show that passion. That's very, like Mark said, just worried about other people and the way they saw you, but the more passionate about it, things I care about I am, the more that I show that, the more opportunities have presented themselves to me, because other people can see that passion, and it's infectious.
And fun.
And fun.
Thank you. Since it's 6:25, I do want to be conscious of our time. So if there are any design students here today and you would like feedback on your project, feel free to ask any questions. If there are any.
Okay, the design teams are here today because we have another big mid-year design review on Monday. So if you all rest a little bit more.
That's fine.
We'll definitely be putting some teams in contact with you guys.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm always happy to answer questions, email or Zoom.
Yeah, no, there's some stuff that seems like a close fit for you guys. Yeah. Some cool stuff going on.
We did have another question, which was, how do you expect the accessible design field to change with development of new technologies? So you kind of spoke about iPads, but perhaps also artificial intelligence as well.
Yeah, well, there's always going to be a part of assistive technology that's really personalized and kind of, but I do think mean, you guys, I think, probably been taking courses about this. There is, Brendan talked about universal design. You guys know about ability-based design at Wilson. You probably heard a little bit about this idea of ability-based design, and then kind of what's next beyond that in terms of really about personalization and about having adaptive systems and systems that are, I mean, I'm parodying some of what Jen Mankoff says now, but Jen is talking a lot about on-demand technology, on-demand assistive technology, meaning stuff that is sort of identified by the disabled person and created on demand for the need at the time, instead of this notion of trying to have designers create a universally designed space or a designer trying to design for a certain set of abilities, to try to think about technologies that would allow for production of something on demand. So it could be something that's produced through fabrication. It could be something that's produced through generative AI, but trying to think about something that, and again, I can't take credit for this. This is, you have geniuses up in Upper Campus, but this is the kind of stuff I hear Jen Mankoff talking about. And so I think that's maybe will be where things go. There are, as you know, a lot of risks, especially in large language models, discrimination that's built into those around disability, and so there's work to be done there. But I think Jen and I are working to try to get a project. Well, actually, Kate Glasgow, I think, is working on it already, but really thinking about how to use generative AI to simplify language for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, for example, and to do that in a way that is accurate, that doesn't bring any bias or so forth into it. But if you think about barriers to access, cognitive access is one of the big barriers that a lot of people face. And so that does seem like a really obvious space for AI, right? Is to be able to simplify language and make it more understandable and usable for a broad set of people. And there's so many spaces, where people need to understand their rights, and so they need to understand the law, or they need to understand policy. And they need to, if they want to advocate for themselves, they need to understand what kinds of bills are trying to be passed and so forth. So I think that notion of on-demand technology, on-demand access is a space. Have you guys been learning about other kind of models or thoughts or like ways of thinking about access that maybe is newer? It's okay if you don't. I'm just, I assume you all learned more than I do, since I don't go to class anymore. What do you think of that idea of on-demand access? Does that seem viable, or like?
Mechanism standpoint, it seems complicated. I've read some papers, involvements, where it's trying to create basically the CAD push button. You're like, kind of want this, and then you specify it, and then it pops out. But the thought of AI doing through, that's why on demand would be computers doing things.
Yeah.
There's just so many little finesse points, right? Even just, right, you can get a lot further in my experience with, just some low fabrication materials, thermoplastics and chloroplast, and tape, a lot further sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right,
So-
it makes sense in the digital realm that many people exist in.
Yeah.
But when you get physical, it's difficult.
It does get difficult. Yeah.
Well, because people have been using like ChatGPT, so like ChatGPT 4, where you like upload images of like
screenshot the web page and really write on the alt text for you.
Yeah, it's a way of just addressing that really common accessibility problem. Yeah. Hopefully it's better than Microsoft. Microsoft writes and it's like picture of person, right?
It's like, this might be a dog, it's like you.
Yeah.
When like my eyes, that's really.
I think that, yeah, all of the pitfalls of AI is definitely something that could be named to a long list of. I think the few things I am excited about it though are like what you described is being able to solve some of these labor intensive cognitive assistive tools. And one that I really was interested in for myself was the Khan Academy's intention to use AI to teach math more efficiently as having an AI tutor. And in my experience of doing math, that has been great. To have a more individualized assessment of where I went wrong, analyze it and say, this is where I think that other students went wrong. You might be having the same problem and then fixing that without having to have the labor of a teacher that wouldn't have the time to sit there and work through every single problem with me. That seems exciting to me, but there is definitely with the actual 3D modeling and putting it into a space, a lot of risk and safety problems that will come into play. And how do you safeguard against that is going to be a complicated problem. I do think that manufacturing 3D printing and some of these other techniques do make it really good for rapid prototyping. And I think that that's going to mean more AT and better AT overall sooner, hopefully. So hopefully it'll be more on demand, but not necessarily bad on demand.
Maybe not Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Earl Grey hot.
If only.
Any other questions from the audience? No? Well, I guess that concludes our panel event then. Thank you both again so much for coming in and attending, and we still have the room for like half an hour. So if anyone has any questions they want to come up and ask the panelists maybe later on, we have some food and drinks available. Unfortunately, no food is allowed. So if you want to eat, please make sure to bring it outside to the hallway. But thank you again, everyone, for attending. Yeah.
Thanks. And if anybody would like to see this book, flip through it. Mine is Jobs at UW, so DJONS@UW. Or I have flyers as well if you wanted to take it. You can get a hold of our program through WhatsApp as well. WhatsApp.